Okay, thanks so much for coming. Really excited to be here. First of all, we'll notice the elephant in the room, which is that it says inventory management on the title, but I'm going to talk about service level today. And actually that is part of the discussion we're going to have about continuous improvement and learning in AI. And not every use case is a good use case. So I'll speak to that a little bit as well. So just to introduce myself, I'm Nena Pidskalny. I'm the Director of Supply Chain Strategy and Planning at FCL. And I have Andrew here with me as well from MicroStrategy, and he'll be speaking a little bit. Awesome. So for those of you, I know one of you knows what Federated Co-op is because he has family in Nanaimo and they have a co-op number. So love that. But for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar, Federated Co-op is a wholesaling entity within Western Canada. My team specifically looks after our consumer products division, which we have 273 retail grocery stores, 432 convenience stores, and 90 home centers for context. So very broad scope of responsibility and nuances. And then just want to draw your attention to the map there. So those are all of our retail locations. That includes some of our agriculture business, cardlock, and some of the other pieces of our business as well. We also operate a refinery in Regina, Saskatchewan as well. So our headquarters is in Saskatoon, so sort of right in the middle of the prairies. We have 10,000 employees. We've been a customer of MicroStrategy since 2019 and have really grown a lot in leveraging the data insights in our journey, which we'll speak a little bit to further on in the presentation. So I'll speak quite a bit about our supply chain transformation and what we've done there in terms of evolution, but wanted to talk a little bit about the solution impact as it relates to MicroStrategy. So I will show a slide a little bit later that shows our strategy house for our supply chain optimization program that will unpack for you the importance of data analytics as a foundational piece to our optimization. So really, we're moving away from a lot of the ad hoc analytics, and we have Tableau and Cognos and a number of other solutions. Trying to get all of our users onto MicroStrategy, especially from a supply chain perspective. That's something very important to us. And really the intent for us is to gain visibility from the end-to-end perspective. So for us, that's supplier to shelf and being able to combine disparate data sets to provide new insights. So that's something very important for us. And one of the main pieces there is we're building a lot of foundational dashboards with MicroStrategy and starting to leverage some of the AI technology for how we get to those insights in a quicker way, as well as I'll show you a video a little bit later of the self-service piece in terms of how we're leveraging AI in that regard as well. So in terms of use cases, and like I said, I would speak a little bit to this. Initially, when we had talked about doing this presentation, we had been working on an inventory management dashboard. So what we call a 9-box, which shows velocity as well as demand variability. So we can understand inventory health and understand maybe where we need to optimize our assortment and inventory holding positions. We were too early to leverage AI, to be honest, as it related to that project. So we actually recently launched a service level dashboard that allows us to see, and I'll show you some examples of what that looks like leveraging the AI tool here. But that was a trusted data source for us, and we could validate the AI was giving us the right results. So that's something that's very important for my team, is making sure that we trust the information that the AI is giving us. So we're working on inventory management, as I had mentioned. We're also doing some work around supply chain operations. So how the distribution centers are performing, what those KPIs and metrics look like, also with regard to workforce planning, and trying to make sure that we have the right dashboards with real-time data so that we can refresh it and deploy our employees in our distribution centers in the most efficient manner. And then the bottom two, I look after a team that looks after procurement as well, so strategic sourcing, as well as supplier negotiations. So we've leveraged MicroStrategy for that use case since 2019. So very interesting insight that's gathered out of there that we bring into our supplier conversations and leverage for better relationships. So you might be wondering, and again, this is going to be a little bit higher level in terms of our supply chain transformation in general. So for us, supply chain transformation is about the end-to-end. So for a long time, our business didn't actually have a dedicated supply chain team, even though we've operated for 90 plus years doing supply chain. So it's been interesting to have that dedicated focus area of supply chain in our business. But we also initiated our project related to optimization from a logistics and distribution standpoint. So really the precipice for this entire conversation started because we have a distribution center that was built in 1959. So it's had its years, and it's done well for us, but it's getting to the point where we need to look at replacing it or figuring out what we do to set our network up optimally in the future. And we also have one distribution center that isn't at full capacity. So we have some nuances in the network in terms of one over capacity, one under capacity. So we're just working through what our network needs to look like longer term. And in addition to that, identifying all of the opportunities for optimization from how we buy product, how we position inventory, how we optimize our transportation. I'll show you our strategy house, which can unpack that a little bit more. So we're at the point now where we had a consultant come in and do a network review for us. So we have our strategy planned in terms of what the network needs to look like and opportunities that have been identified. But actually some of the initial work that we're doing is on data. So you'll see in our strategy slide, it's the foundation of this work. People, data, and technology are the three foundational pieces. So we need to first be able to understand what's going on so that we can make sure that we're making the right decisions and optimizing without adverse consequences. As we know, the supply chain is fully connected, so we don't want to be making decisions without the full set of information. In terms of challenges encountered, and I'll speak a little bit to more so on the data side. So one thing is data governance, right? We have a ton of data, and we talked a little bit about just the overwhelming amount of data, I think, to be honest, nowadays. And we have data in disparate systems that is not connected at all today. And a lot of times we're not able to connect those pieces today to be able to understand what's really happening from the end-to-end perspective. So the first thing we needed to do was set up some data governance, understand where the data that we were going to need existed, understand what that looked like, and work through making sure it was set up in the appropriate way and handled in the appropriate manner. The other piece is just on the speed at which we'd like to consume data. So as we're starting to go down this journey, starting to provide insight and dashboards to our stakeholders, they want more of it and they want it faster. And so that's been a little bit of the shift for us in looking at how AI can help us with getting to those insights, building dashboards in a quicker way, so that we can get to those insights in a faster manner as we're developing out our optimization program. And I'll speak a little bit to what's next once I show the strategy slide, because I think this might be interesting. So we love strategy houses at our company. I don't know if anyone else does, but this is our jam. So just to kind of orient, I could spend literally an hour on this slide, but I won't do that because you'll all fall asleep. But in terms of the way that this is structured, I mentioned this before, but the bottom part is the foundation. So those are critical pieces that hold up the rest of the strategy house. Without those, we don't have a strategy. So the people part of it, the change management, which obviously data has a lot of change management, data and performance. So for us, we have a charter specifically on that and how we're developing out more visibility and more insight. And then the technology piece is the other foundational piece. We also have a full layer of optimization. So that's everything from how we order and flow product through the network, how we handle our inventory, hence why we're building out some insight around that, how we manage our suppliers, and how we optimize our transportation network. And then the upper part of the strategy house is specifically related to operations. So we've got one pillar that's specific to our optimization of our brownfield sites. So how do we get better with the existing infrastructure that we have? And then we have an interesting opportunity to potentially build a new greenfield site. So what does that look like? How is that going to unlock value for us? And then because we have a cooperative model, meaning that our members actually own us, we have to make sure that our retails are always top of mind, hence them being at the top of the strategy house. And really the intent of our entire program, if I could sum it up, is to improve our service, improve our cost competitiveness and strengthening our network, and enable the way in which we work and leverage data in a better way. So chatted a little bit about this, but this is a bit of a deeper dive into our data journey and kind of where we started. So as part of our engagement with a consultant, we actually built a supply chain digital twin as part of that. So a simulation tool that we could understand what would happen if we closed a node or opened a node or went to a 1 DC network or a 5 DC network. That allowed us to be able to understand what optimally from a cost and service perspective we needed to do to set our supply chain up for success in the future. So that takes a ton of data. I cannot tell you how much data. So we probably spent, I'm not even exaggerating, 3 to 4 weeks just gathering all of the data for the consultant and cleaning it and getting it ready to go into the technology, which we use Lamasoft, for those of you familiar with digital modeling tools. So that was a good experience for us to actually understand where our data existed and where the data was good and not so good in terms of quality. So that was sort of the initial starting point. From there, we did the full supply chain network review, which you saw some of the strategy house in the prior slide that resulted in a lot of different recommendations. A lot of things around data as well in terms of data governance, working with stakeholders, things to think about that are going to provide the most amount of value, which is really where we started. And from there, as we started getting more insight and information into what we needed to do moving forward from a data standpoint, we built a charter that allows us to prioritize and plan our roadmap. As we know, we can't do everything all at once. And so actually the first part of our charter was identifying all of the data sources, identifying where they were, and starting to land them into our data warehouse in a clean manner and get everything where it needs to go. We also are developing some cubes within MicroStrategy that allow us to more easily run ad hoc analytics for those types of things that constantly come up in terms of interest. So for now, that's sort of a first step, with the intent obviously to build more dashboards as we identify more and more of those use cases. And as mentioned, we have developed the service level dashboard, and then are in the thick of inventory management and some of the supply chain operations dashboards as well. So now for the real reason you're probably all here. We have leveraged AI in a use case, leveraging our service level dashboard so that we can leverage and understand more of the root cause. And just to give a little bit of background in terms of where this whole service level piece started. So as I mentioned, we're a cooperative, so our members own us. So each of our associations has a general manager and CEO. And so oftentimes our chief supply chain officer, my boss, gets calls from our associations and they'll say, the service has been poor recently, or, what's been going on in the last few weeks. And historically, he didn't have a way to validate that or look at the information to say, yeah, you're right, let me look into what's going on and let's try to remedy it. Or actually your service level was standard week over week, or it was stable or improving. So the initial precipice for this was an executive view of this. And so there was a lot of information and data put into this dashboard to be able to see information on different time horizons. So 1 week, 4 weeks, 12 weeks, 26 weeks, 52 weeks, year over year, previous period. So the amount of time analysis that went into this in terms of being able to slice and dice the data was significant. And then we're able to view this, the bottom piece, and you'll see it when we go to the video, but we can see all of our association performance and whether that's improving or declining over time. And we have a view specifically in here that filters those challenged retails to the top so that our chief supply chain officer and my team can identify those problem areas and address them in a quicker manner. The other thing on here that I think is just quite interesting, and again, in supply chain, I think we sometimes forget about the impact that we have, right? 1% improvement in service level can be millions of dollars of value. So one thing that we did was actually put a number to it, both because we're a wholesaling entity and we have retail stores. From a wholesale perspective, we quantified what the service gap actually is costing our business, as well as from a retail perspective, so that we could actually understand and get buy-in for the important work that we have to do with our stakeholders to improve service and just get the right product at the shelf at the right time. So at a high level, that's why we chose this dashboard. We're very familiar with it, we understand it. But one of the really interesting use cases of this is that we had this first iteration and the executive view ready and published before the other detailed pages. And at the time, we didn't have AI, but that would have been a game changer for us because all of these other detailed views, and you'll see it when we go to the video, we could have drilled into the information that we needed to understand root cause if we had had AI. But because of that, we had to wait for the other pieces to be published, which took a few weeks, right? So lack of information for a couple weeks, obviously good at a high level to understand store performance. But a lot of our stakeholders want to understand which categories or suppliers or items are causing problems so that we can remedy that and try to improve on the service. So a lot of work went into this, and thank you to Andrew at MicroStrategy for helping us get this all prepared. So I will play the video and kind of just walk you through what we're gonna see here in terms of the use case. But imagine that you're a supply chain analyst and you notice there was a dip in service level in a week. Everybody's in that mindset, okay. All right, so we can see here in the yellow line, there's a dip in service level on week ending March 23rd, 2024. So we're gonna ask, describe to me which suppliers have the highest units not shipped, meaning which suppliers shorted us the most during that week. So this is helping us to understand which suppliers we have problems with. This is directionally helpful, but you might be wondering, well, is this a new problem or are these suppliers causing us grief consistently, right? So we're gonna ask the bot that. So what you'll see is the top two suppliers here, they had a significant increase in terms of the units not shipped in that week. So there was probably a promotion or something going on. We can start to kind of piece together a picture of what might be happening here in terms of which suppliers are having issues, and this seems to be somewhat of a new issue. You might want to know, for those two top suppliers that were not performing, what products are causing a problem. And again, we could not have done this without this AI. We could do it, it just would take a lot of drilling in terms of the information or the more detailed page. So hopefully nobody here works for Campbell's or Hershey, but So as you can see here, there's a few specific items that are causing problems. So Campbell's chicken broth, beef broth, and some confectionery items are causing issues. So we might want to know, is this a widespread problem in our supply chain, or is there one particular region that might be causing more of a problem than others? So we're going to ask, we have 3 distribution centers that we ship from. So we're going to ask if there's any nuances between the distribution centers. And this is actual data, by the way. So this is going to tell us that our Saskatoon warehouse service level is 20%. The other regions were 100. So we can start to understand the root cause of what happened here, right? And this is one very specific example, but this allows us to not just guess anymore. Oh, the service level declined that week. Great. What am I going to do about it, right? What are actually the problem items and suppliers that are driving that decline? So in that case, we would follow up with our Saskatoon distribution center, follow up with the supplier, try to understand what was going on, try to understand what the root cause from a supplier standpoint was. Maybe we didn't give them enough lead time. Maybe they tried to deliver the product and we couldn't get them in, right? There's a whole bunch of different reasons and context that we need, but at least we understand what problem items and categories there are. And then I'm going to show you another video, and you'll have to pay attention to the way in which one of my employees, so she uses MicroStrategy dashboards for analysis all the time, but she's not an analyst at all. So she has never went in to build a dashboard, just for context. She would have no idea. So we got her on a call with one of our analysts and just recorded the session and asked her to prompt AI to build her a dashboard, just for context. And you'll have to laugh because you can tell we're Canadian because of the way she asks the bot some of the questions here. So this is quick, but this is really, it was about a 30-minute meeting. Gave her a little bit of prompting, gave her a little bit of information on how to ask the questions to AI. And within that time span, somebody who had never used MicroStrategy before was able to create a 4 visualization dashboard. So this would allow us, and again, something that can allow us to get to those insights quicker. It might not be perfect, but a lot of times when we're developing or creating POCs, it's better to know early that that's not what we want. Awesome. So you might be wondering what we learned. I think we've spoken a little bit about this already. But some of the key pieces for us, I talked about why we didn't use our inventory dashboard. We didn't know enough about that data set yet. There will be a time where AI will be applicable for that, but until we know it and we trust it and feel good about the data, it just didn't make sense for this use case for us. We also have been working on a SKU optimization project in the background, and that leveraged 9 different data sources, 1,000 lines of code, very complex, and metrics from supplier to our warehouse to retail. And one thing that we learned as it related to that, because we tried to leverage AI for that, and the bot doesn't have a lot of context, right? So we had very similar sounding column names as sales or profit or gross margin, and the bot could not understand the difference between them. And so that's a watch out, right? Sometimes a more simple dashboard is potentially better, or one that you're at least familiar with in terms of how the columns are named and what that might look like. And that really goes to the second point here, is just about simplification. So if we can remove unnecessary columns, try to simplify the data that we're inputting, try to avoid where we have sales in 4 different places because the bot isn't going to know which sales number you want. And there are some ways now to get around a bit of that with some of the instruction capability that's coming out through some of the iterations of MicroStrategy, but still a bit of a watch out. And then we found some nuances with data aggregation causing some nuances. So that was just one other thing that the raw data seemed to be better in terms of being able to drill into some of the information. The other thing, and I had mentioned this a little bit already, we had some nuances around, because there were so many different time series that we have, latest 4 weeks, latest 12 weeks, year over year, previous period, we had to actually structure the data in a different way for the AI to be able to properly advise. So that's just something to think about. Sometimes your data set might have to be restructured so that the data can be consumed in the appropriate manner and that it's giving you the outcome that you're looking for. And then we talked a little bit about the attribute forms already. That's something that's very important to make sure is well defined. And then the other piece is just common language and thinking about your user. So our team, for example, would not know that invoice_amount is what they would have to type in to understand what sales were. So we were leveraging the instructions to tell the bot, if somebody asks for sales, pull in the invoice_amount column. So that's just another example of where you kind of need to be prescriptive and think about your user, making sure that that it's seamless for them as they're trying to find information. Andrew's going to take us through a little bit more information on the MicroStrategy side in terms of what some of the latest features are and how that's helping out some of our users.
Yeah, and really before I started that, and actually to add a little bit more context, I think one of the things that we've done quite well is really worked through a great partnership and collaboration to really understand, right? So what that gave us to do is really made me understand really the use cases that they were actually trying to solve, and then how can we actually work on those use cases and bring the challenges, right, of some of that into the bot and how we can go ahead and make it a lot more easier for them to go ahead and understand. And one of the things that they really loved on the new features side of things is when you talk about data, one of the first things is when you're actually either building a dashboard or actually building the bot, the question is well, what kind of data am I looking at, right? Like where's that data kind of coming from? What are maybe some of the details behind that? And you'll notice that one of the great features that they really loved and found value of was that ask about feature that you'll see. And what that does, it actually kind of gives you some context, right, about the data, so they understand maybe how I can actually go ahead and ask a question. And if you want to understand, right, more details about that, you can actually go ahead and click on a button and it'll already pre-prompt you a series of questions about that metric or about that attribute, right? So it gave them a lot more confidence. And that really goes into the next slide of about confidence, right? So to tell you a quick story, I remember my first presentation with Stella as the account team. You know, we're really excited to introduce AI to the FCL team with Nena and her team. And we're on a Zoom session, and there was one particular individual. He's not in a room, so that's okay. But I could see it in his eyes and just the way he was actually asking questions and really going into, well, how does it actually work? What is the AI? What is it behind? What is behind the scenes? And he asked me two specific questions. He goes, how can you prove accuracy? And how do I know that it's going to be accurate? And the second one is, can I see the SQL? Because as all analytics people, right, we understand, like, if I understand the SQL, I know where the data is coming from. I can now deduce that, yes, it is correct. And having those types of conversations and understanding, you know, it's great to see that yesterday when we were speaking with him, he came to me and he told me, he goes, that interpretation feature that you guys included to actually show capabilities that when I ask a question, now I understand where it's actually coming from. Complete game changer, complete confidence booster, not only for him, but actually for his team as well, right? So producing that and exposing that to the end users just made it a quick, easy win, right? So, and not only that, you know, let's say it did maybe, you know, bring out a negative result. What's great about it is now you actually understand that, and then you can actually go ahead and change, right, some of that interpretation, right, with the instructions to then refix that to get that proper result. And those are really some other great key lessons that we actually learned.
Absolutely. And just a bit of another example, and I think Andrew's talking about the same person who, isn't here. But I think one thing that, just from a change management perspective, a lot of us deal with data analysts, right? And they're going to ask a lot of questions, and they should. But it probably took our analysts 6 weeks to get on board. There was a lot of questions. Well, how do I know accuracy? What about this? And so they needed to peek behind the covers a little bit to understand. And also, we have a sandbox environment, so we were able to use different use cases. One of my team members, actually, we had a cheese data set. So he created a cheese bot and named it Chester. And it was Canadian, so it said A at the end of everything, which was just really fun. And so the team was like playing around in that, and it kind of added some camaraderie because it was a little bit like less formal, right, and more exploratory. But I'd say let your people play in it, let them ask questions, let them get comfortable, because at the end of the day, they have to be the ones to trust it, right? And so there was probably, about 6 weeks in, I got a call, and it was like a light bulb had gone off. Like, I get it now. This could be a really big unlock. I can see a use case. But when we had started with that data set I talked to that was very complicated and we couldn't get the results, that's super frustrating, right? And so if we had stopped there, we might have said, there's not that much value in AI, we don't get it. So I would just say, make sure that you're selecting a use case that you know and you trust the data before you make any assumptions in terms of the applicability for your business. That was all we had, so happy to take any questions from the audience. Thank you. Okay, well, maybe start, I know we have a runner, so we'll maybe start on the right side of the room. If anybody has questions, just raise your hand, please.
I know the supply chain is a big problem. We are in the wholesale HVAC industry.
Yep.
I can see how it's been useful. My question is that what level of data, because if you have a huge amount of data, how was the ask responding back? Because usually you go down to this product level.
Yep.
At the location. So how was the performance and how was the overall experience with the users?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think some of the lessons learned on that were just about simplification of data as well, right? So that if your initial dashboard is not well performing, AI is just going to add complexity to that, right? So first of all, make sure your dashboard is performing well. And then the nice thing about, and again, you may need to set up your data set in a different way, right? Depending on the context. But the nice thing about the AI piece is that currently, you would have to go and potentially filter, like in that example I had with that executive dashboard. We could have got the information, but it would have taken like 20 filters, right, to be able to get to that level. And so that's fine if you have time to do that. But being able to actually drill into it, you're not then waiting for all of those filters to apply either, right? So we didn't find any issues with performance. But I would say your dashboard needs to be well performing before you add AI on top of it, because it's just going to add some complexity.
So you use the in-memory cube basically?
Yes. Yeah. Anybody else?
I have a question about your employee. Did she write thank you to the AI?
I think, I'm sure she did, because I think she's like a little bit afraid, like if the AI bots ever all come for us, she doesn't want to like be on the bad side. So she was being very careful, but she's also like the nicest person you'd ever meet. So it's just in her nature.
How is the licensing work? Like every user in the supply chain team has to ask, like it's based on certain folks only how it is.
So I don't get involved in a lot of those details because that's with our IT team. And I don't know if somebody from MicroStrategy wants to speak to that, but I don't know.
When you roll out, you roll out to people like level, certain level, and hey, only certain folks can get this.
Yes, so only my team right now is leveraging AI. So we wanted to because our team is driving a lot of transformative work within our business, working with the MicroStrategy team and our IT team, we thought we were the best use case to be able to show the value. I think if you're gonna expand it to everybody, you would have to make sure your use case was really good. And I would say start small, right? We like to pilot, crawl, walk, run. So that's exactly what we're doing right now, just keeping it within our team. Yeah.
What are the challenges you face
With regard to our supply chain transformation or
the data side?
on the data side? Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for us is just the amount of requests we get as we start diving into, so one thing our team, and a mandate that I have for my team, is not to just replicate reports we already have, right? Don't build me a dashboard that somebody could go view a report on, right? There's no value in that. So how do we combine data sets that combine insights that people have never seen before, right? And that goes to that end-to-end piece, right? Being able to show more visibility. So as we've started to build out some of that, we get a lot of requests like, well, what about this? And, oh, could you build me this? And that, you know, when we have a lean team, so there's only so much you can do and so much you can prioritize. But I am excited about some of the AI features because I think it's going to encourage a little bit more self-service, or at least allowing my analysts who maybe aren't as technically savvy and building a MicroStrategy dashboard from the ground up to have a starting place, right? So that's where I think a lot of the value is going to come in. But it's just like the amount of data, to be honest, and the amount of requests has been the biggest challenge.
So basically, I want to know, you had the dashboard built before you jumped into the AI.
Correct.
World. Did you have to make any structural fundamental changes? I know I appreciate the challenges that you listed, saying you have to make sure that you need to mainstream the data set.
Yep.
Remove any columns that you didn't want in the whole mix. Did you have to make any changes like that in order to adapt the AI, or did you have that game plan already figured out before you even jumped in there?
No, so when we were testing it, I had made mention of it because of the amount of nuances we have with the time series. That had to be restructured for the AI to properly read it. So that was the biggest change in the data set, to be able to make sure that it could appropriately understand what weeks you were talking about and give you the right answer. So that would have been the most fundamental change. Otherwise, not anything majorly structural.
That was the biggest challenge.
Yes. So we have just embedded it into this dashboard right now. So, and maybe Andrew, I don't know if you want to talk about some of that process, but I'm not a technical person as it relates to this. So he's probably better to speak to that piece, but really just using this as a test case, right? So it's not like fully rolled out and embedded in everything at this point, just very much a pilot use case to get our teams on board to using it. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for your time.